On a freezing winter night, a black waitress noticed two little kids shivering outside her cafe. She took off her own warm coat and wrapped it around them. She didn't know those children belonged to the most feared Korean mafia boss. The January wind cut through downtown Los Angeles like a blade, turning the 3 a.m. streets into a frozen wasteland that had no business existing in Southern California. Nancy Wright pulled her coat tighter as she wiped down the last table at Rosie's all-night diner, her shift finally ending after 16 hours on her feet. Her ankles screamed. Her lower back felt like someone had taken a hammer to it. But the tips had been good tonight, 280 seran, enough to cover half her mother's medication this month. Through the diner's frost-covered windows, she could see the bus stop across the street, empty except for two small figures huddled together on the bench. Children? Nancy's hand froze mid-wipe. What the hell were kids doing out here at 3 a.m. in weather cold enough to see her breath inside the diner? "Nancy, you're cut!" Her manager Rico called from the kitchen. "Get out of here before I have to pay you overtime." Yeah, Nancy muttered, but her eyes stayed fixed on those two small shapes. They were pressed together like they were trying to become one person, sharing warmth. One of them, the smaller one, was shaking so hard Nancy could see it from across the street. She should mind her business. Should catch her bus, go home to her studio apartment, collapse into bed. She had another double shift starting in 9 hours. But Nancy's mother had raised her with rules, and rule number 1 was, you don't walk past a child who needs help. Ever. Shit, Nancy whispered, pulling on her coat. The thick wool one she'd saved for 3 months to buy. The one that actually kept out the California cold that everyone claimed didn't exist. She grabbed the 2 chocolate croissants that hadn't sold, leftovers Rico let the staff take home, and pushed out into the night. The cold hit her like a physical blow. Jesus Christ, it had to be in the 30s. She crossed the empty street, boots crunching on ice that had formed in the gutter, and got her first clear look at the children. Korean. Both of them. Boys. One looked maybe 7, with serious dark eyes and his arm wrapped protectively around the smaller one, who couldn't be more than 5. They wore expensive-looking clothes, designer jackets that probably cost more than Nancy made in a month. But they were soaked through like they'd been caught in the earlier rain and never dried. The smaller boy's lips had a blue tinge that made Nancy's heart clench. "Hey, sweethearts," Nancy said softly, crouching down to their level. The older boy's arm tightened around his brother, his eyes going wary, protective. "It's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. I work right there." She pointed to the diner. "Are you lost? Where are your parents?" The older boy said something in Korean, his voice small and scared. The little one just buried his face in his brother's shoulder, shivering so hard his teeth chattered audibly. "Okay, baby. Okay," Nancy murmured. She didn't speak Korean, but fear was universal. These kids were terrified. "Let's get you warm, yeah?" She started to unbutton her coat, and the older boy's eyes widened. He shook his head frantically, saying something rapid in Korean that Nancy couldn't understand but whose meaning was clear. "No, we can't take that." "Sweetheart, you're freezing," Nancy said gently. "Both of you are. I've got a sweater on, see? I'll be fine. But your brother..." She looked at the smaller boy, at the blue-tinged lips and the violent shivering. "He needs to get warm. Please, let me help." The older boy hesitated, torn between pride and fear and the undeniable reality that his brother was in trouble. Finally, he nodded, just barely. Nancy wrapped her coat around both of them, the thick wool swallowing their small bodies. The smaller boy made a small sound of relief as the warmth hit him. "There we go," Nancy said, pulling out the croissants. "You hungry?" The older boy took them with trembling hands, immediately breaking off pieces and feeding them to his brother first, making sure the little one ate before taking a bite himself. He watched Nancy with those serious, too old eyes. "What are your names?" "Lee," the older boy said carefully, his English heavily accented. "My brother is Kim. We are waiting for our father." "At 3 a.m.? Nancy tried to keep the judgment out of her voice. "How long have you been waiting, Lee?" He looked down. Since the sun went away. Since sunset. These babies had been out here for maybe 8 hours, in the freezing cold, soaking wet. Nancy felt rage building in her chest, at whatever parent could leave their children like this, at a world where this could happen, at her own helplessness in the face of it. "Okay," she said, making a decision. Okay, Lee, here's what we're going to do. We're going to go inside the diner where it's warm, and we're going to call someone to help find your dad. Does he have a phone? Yes, but Lee's face crumpled slightly. He said to wait here. He said he would come back. If we leave, he won't find us. The loyalty in his voice broke Nancy's heart. This little boy, freezing and scared, still trying to follow his father's instructions, still believing Dad would come back. Your dad would want you to be safe and warm, Nancy said firmly. And I promise, I swear to you, Lee, we'll make sure he knows where you are. But we can't stay out here. Kim needs to warm up. Look at him. Lee looked at his brother, really looked, and Nancy saw the moment fear won over obedience. Kim had stopped shivering, which was worse than the shaking. Nancy had grown up in Michigan before moving to LA. She knew that when you stopped shivering in the cold, you were in serious trouble. Okay, Lee whispered. Okay, we go. Nancy scooped up Kim. The little boy was light as a bird, worryingly so, and took Lee's hand. They crossed back to the diner, and Nancy pushed through the door to find Rico about to lock up. Nancy, what the? Rico stopped, taking in the scene. Nancy in just her sweater, shaking from cold. The two small Korean children, one barely conscious in her arms. Jesus Christ. Call 911, Nancy said. This one's hypothermic, and we need to find their father. Name's Lee. What's your last name? Park, the boy said quietly. Park Lee. My brother is Park Kim. Our father is Park Hae-jun. The name meant nothing to Nancy, but Rico's face went pale. Park Hae-jun. Are you sure, kid? Yes, Lee said, confusion crossing his features. You know my father? Rico met Nancy's eyes over the children's heads, and something in his expression sent ice down her spine. Nancy, outside, now. I'm not leaving them. Maria, Rico called to the overnight cook. Get these kids some hot chocolate, warm blankets from the back. Now. Then he grabbed Nancy's arm and pulled her toward the door. You too. We need to talk. Outside, with the children safely inside and visible through the window, Rico turned to Nancy with an expression she'd never seen on his usually jovial face. Fear. Nancy, listen to me very carefully. Park Hae-jun is not just some deadbeat dad who forgot his kids. He runs the Baek Du-pa, the Korean Mafia in LA. He's one of the most dangerous men in the city. Nancy's world tilted. What? Those kids in there? They're not just lost. Something went wrong. Something big. Because Park Hae-jun doesn't forget his children. Everyone knows he's ruthless as hell in business, but his kids are his world. If they've been out here for 8 hours, Rico ran a hand through his hair. Something's very wrong. So we call the police, Nancy said. But Rico was already shaking his head. You call the cops on Park Hae-jun's kids, and when he finds out, and he will find out, he's going to want to know why. He's going to investigate. And Nancy, you're a black woman who just took his kids. Do you understand what I'm saying? I didn't take them. I helped them. You think he's going to see the difference? You think his people are going to care about your good intentions when they find out his sons were in your possession? Rico's voice was rising with panic. These organizations, they don't think like normal people. They see threats everywhere. You could end up... I'm not leaving 2 babies to freeze to death because I'm scared of their father. Nancy cut him off, her voice steel. Call 911. Get Kim checked out. And then we figure out how to contact Park Hae-jun and let him know his sons are safe. That's what's happening. End of discussion. Rico stared at her for a long moment, then sighed. You're either the bravest woman I know or the most foolish. Probably both, Nancy said, already heading back inside where Lee was trying to get his brother to drink hot chocolate with shaking hands. The ambulance arrived 12 minutes later. The paramedics, a tired-looking white woman and a young Latino man, immediately went to work on Kim, wrapping him in heated blankets and checking his vitals, while Lee hovered anxiously nearby. Moderate hypothermia, the woman said. He needs to go to the hospital. What about you, kiddo? She turned to Lee, who shook his head stubbornly. I stay with Kim. I take care of him. We'll both go with him, Nancy said, making another decision she probably shouldn't. She hesitated. What was she? A stranger who'd found them. I'm looking after them until we can reach their father. The paramedics exchanged glances but didn't argue. They'd seen worse situations in LA at 3 a.m. Within minutes, they were loaded into the ambulance. Nancy sitting beside Lee while Kim lay on the gurney, small and vulnerable under the medical equipment. Miss Nancy? Lee's hand found hers. Kim will be okay? He's going to be fine, baby, Nancy said, squeezing his fingers gently. They're going to warm him up and make sure he's healthy. You did good, Lee. You kept him safe until help came. I tried, Lee whispered, and Nancy saw tears tracking down his cheeks for the first time. I tried to keep him warm, but my jacket was wet and he kept shaking, and I didn't know what to do. You did everything right, Nancy said firmly, pulling the little boy against her side. You stayed with him. You didn't leave him alone. That's what mattered. Your dad is going to be so proud of you. My dad, Lee's voice broke. Something bad happened. There were men, and they were angry, and my dad told us to run. He said, wait at the bus stop. He would come get us. But he didn't come, Miss Nancy. What if he can't come? Nancy's blood ran cold. Men. Angry. Her mind raced through possibilities. None of them good. Did these men hurt your dad? I don't know. We ran like he said. But there was shouting and… Lee closed his eyes. Sounds like fireworks. Pop, pop, pop. Kim was scared. I told him it was just fireworks, but they both knew it wasn't fireworks. Gunshots. Park Hae-jun had been in some kind of confrontation, had told his kids to run, and they'd been waiting for 8 hours in the freezing cold for a father who might be dead. Okay, Nancy said, keeping her voice calm even as her mind screamed. Okay, Lee, here's what we're going to do. When we get to the hospital, I'm going to make some calls, find out where your dad is, get you back to him. I promise. You promise? Lee's eyes were huge, desperate for reassurance. I promise. I'm not going to leave you alone. Either of you. Nancy had no idea how she'd keep that promise, but she'd figure it out. She always did. St. Vincent's emergency room at 4 a.m. was a special kind of hell. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The smell of disinfectant mixed with bodily fluids hung heavy in the air. A drunk man shouted obscenities at the nurse's station, while a young mother tried to quiet a crying baby. Nancy sat with Lee in the waiting area while doctors examined Kim in the back. The boy hadn't left her side, his small hand gripping hers like a lifeline. She'd wrapped him in her coat again, the one she'd gotten back from Kim when the paramedics had their heated blankets, and he was finally starting to look less like a drowned rat. Miss Nancy? Lee said quietly. Why did you help us? You don't know us. The question was so simple, but the weight behind it, the confusion of a child who'd been left alone in the cold, made Nancy's throat tight. Because you needed help, sweetheart. That's enough reason. But your coat, it's cold outside. You need it. I've got other coats, Nancy lied. She didn't. This was her only winter coat, the one she saved for months to buy. But Lee didn't need to know that. Besides, you and your brother needed it more than me. My father says… Lee paused, choosing his words carefully. My father says not many people help without wanting something back. That the world is transactional, Nancy supplied. Yes, that word. He says everyone wants something. Your father might be right about a lot of the world, Nancy said carefully, not wanting to contradict, but also wanting this little boy to know different was possible. But not everyone. Some people help because it's the right thing to do, because they were raised to look out for others, because they remember what it's like to need help and not get it. Lee looked up at her with those two old eyes. You needed help once, and no one came. Nancy thought about her father leaving when she was 8, about being evicted from 3 apartments before she was 12, about watching her mother work herself sick, trying to keep them fed, about the time she'd gotten jumped walking home from school, and a dozen people had walked past without stopping. Yeah, baby, she said softly. I've needed help, so when I see someone else who needs it, I remember how that feels, and I help if I can. You're a good person, Miss Nancy. I'm just a person, Lee, trying to do right when I can. A commotion at the emergency room entrance made them both look up. 3 Korean men in expensive suits burst through the doors, moving with military precision. The lead man was tall, broad-shouldered, with a scar cutting through his left eyebrow. He barked something in Korean at the nurse's station, his tone brooking no argument. Lee's entire body went rigid. Uncle Jay, he breathed, and Nancy didn't know if it was relief or fear in his voice. The scarred man's head snapped toward them, his eyes cold, calculating, locked onto Lee, then moved to Nancy. She saw the assessment happen in real time. Black woman, late 20s, cheap clothes, sitting with Park Hae-jun's son. The suspicion that crossed his face made her blood run cold. He crossed the waiting room in long strides, the other two men flanking him like bodyguards. Lee jumped up and Nancy rose with him, keeping herself between the boy and these men until she knew what was happening. "Lee," the scarred man said in accented English, dropping to one knee. "Are you hurt? Where is Kim?" "Kim is with the doctors. He was very cold. But Miss Nancy helped us. She gave us her coat and brought us here." Lee's voice was stronger now, less scared. "She saved us, Uncle Jay." Uncle Jay's eyes moved to Nancy, and the suspicion was still there, but joined now by something else. Confusion, maybe. "You are Miss Nancy?" "Nancy Wright," she said, keeping her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I found Lee and Kim at the bus stop across from where I work. They were freezing. I brought them here to get warm and medical attention." "The bus stop." Something flickered across Uncle Jay's face. They were where they were supposed to be. Hae-jun told them to wait there. He stood, his full height intimidating. "Why did you move them?" "Because Kim was hypothermic," Nancy said, not backing down. "He'd stopped shivering. His lips were blue. Another hour out there, and you would have been identifying his body instead of picking him up from the hospital." The bluntness made Uncle Jay blink. One of the other men said something sharp in Korean, but Uncle Jay held up a hand, silencing him. "You are very bold, Miss Wright, speaking to me this way." "I don't know who you are," Nancy lied smoothly. "I just know that two little boys needed help, and I gave it. If that's a problem for you, that's your issue, not mine." "Uncle Jay," Lee interjected, tugging on the man's suit jacket. "Please, Miss Nancy is nice. She took care of us. Don't be mean to her." Something in Uncle Jay's expression softened, just slightly. He looked down at Lee, then back at Nancy. "Hae-jun will want to speak with you, to thank you for protecting his sons." "Is he?" Nancy hesitated, then decided Lee had a right to know. "Is their father alive?" Lee said there was trouble, that he heard gunshots. Uncle Jay's jaw tightened. "He is alive. Injured but alive. There was an ambush. He got the boys out, but..." He glanced at Lee, clearly not wanting to say more in front of the child. "He will recover." "Thank God," Nancy breathed, and Lee's whole body sagged with relief. A doctor emerged from the back, a young South Asian woman with tired eyes. "Family of Park Kim?" "I am his uncle," Uncle Jay said immediately. "How is he?" "He's going to be fine. We've got his core temperature back up. No frostbite, thank God. Whoever got him inside when they did saved him from serious complications." The doctor's eyes found Nancy. "That was you?" "Yes, ma'am." "Good work. Another hour and we'd be having a different conversation. He can go home, but he needs to stay warm and hydrated. I want to see him back here in 3 days for a follow-up." She handed Uncle Jay a packet of discharge papers. "Can I see him?" Lee asked, looking between the doctor and Uncle Jay. "Of course, sweetheart," the doctor said. "Come on back. He's been asking for you." Lee started to follow, then stopped. He turned back to Nancy and, before she could react, threw his arms around her waist. "Thank you, Miss Nancy, for everything." Nancy's eyes burned as she hugged him back. "You're welcome, baby. You take care of your brother, okay?" "I will." Lee pulled back, grabbed her hand, and looked up at Uncle Jay. "Miss Nancy has to come too. Kim will want to thank her." Uncle Jay looked like he wanted to argue, but Lee's expression was stubborn. "Very well, Miss Wright, if you would accompany us." They moved through the emergency room corridors, the two other men staying close. Nancy felt hyper-aware of everything. The weight of their attention, the way other people moved out of their path, the quiet menace these men carried like cologne. Kim was in a small room, propped up in a hospital bed that made him look even tinier. His color was better, no more blue tinge to his lips, but he looked exhausted. When he saw Lee, his face lit up. "Hyung!" He reached out, and Lee rushed forward, climbing carefully onto the bed to hug his brother. They spoke rapidly in Korean, Kim's voice still weak but animated. Then Kim looked past Lee and saw Nancy. His eyes widened, and he said something in Korean, pointing at her. Lee nodded, speaking in their language, and Kim's face transformed with joy. "He says you're the nice lady with the warm coat," Uncle Jay translated, something softer in his voice. He says you're beautiful like a princess, and you saved him when he was scared. Nancy's throat went tight. Tell him he's very brave, and I'm glad he's feeling better. Uncle Jay translated, and Kim beamed. Then the little boy looked at her coat, the one still wrapped around Lee, and his expression fell. He said something that sounded distressed. He's worried you're cold without your coat, Uncle Jay said. He wants to give it back, but Lee won't let him take it off. Lee needs it more right now, Nancy said gently. But tell him thank you for thinking of me. That's very sweet. More translation. Kim looked thoughtful, then said something else. Uncle Jay's eyebrows rose. What did he say? Nancy asked. He said... Uncle Jay paused, something almost like amusement crossing his face. He said when his father comes, he will buy you 10 coats, 100 coats, all the coats in the world, because you gave yours to strangers, and that makes you a hero. Nancy laughed, the sound startling in the sterile hospital room. Tell him 1 coat is plenty, and I don't need payment. I'm just happy he's safe. But as Uncle Jay translated, Nancy saw something shift in his expression. Respect, maybe, or reassessment, like he was realizing she wasn't what he'd first assumed. Miss Wright, he said after a moment, I apologize for my suspicion earlier. In our world, kindness is rare. Usually when someone helps, they want something in return. But I see now that you are simply a good person who helped children in need. I appreciate that, Nancy said, and I understand being protective. Those boys are lucky to have people who care about them so much. They are Heijun's entire world, Uncle Jay said quietly. Their mother died 3 years ago. Cancer. Since then, he has lived only for them. Worked to build something better, to give them a future away from... He stopped, remembering he was talking to a stranger. Away from the life he's in, Nancy finished for him. I get it. Look, I don't know what happened tonight, and honestly, I don't need to know. I just wanted to make sure Lee and Kim were safe. That's it. They can have my coat back when Lee's ready, and I'll be on my way. No, Uncle Jay said firmly. Heijun will want to thank you himself, and he will want to replace your coat at minimum. Please, Miss Wright, allow us this courtesy. You have done our family a great service. Nancy wanted to argue, wanted to just disappear back into her ordinary life. But Lee and Kim were both looking at her with such hope, such trust, that she couldn't say no. Okay, she said finally, but I need to call my job. I'm supposed to be back in 5 hours. We will handle it, Uncle Jay said. Which diner do you work at? Rosie's all night on 7th and Broadway. Uncle Jay said something in Korean to one of his men, who immediately pulled out his phone. Consider it handled. Your shift will be covered with pay. You can't just... Miss Wright, you saved Park Hae-jun's sons. There is very little we cannot do for you now. The words weren't a boast, just a statement of fact. Please, sit, rest. The boys enjoy your company, and Hae-jun should be out of surgery soon. Surgery? Nancy's stomach dropped. I thought you said he was okay. He will be, Uncle Jay said, but he took 3 bullets protecting his sons. He needs time to heal. Nancy ended up spending the next 4 hours in that hospital room, watching over Lee and Kim while they drifted in and out of sleep. Uncle Jay and his men rotated shifts in the hallway, always one of them visible through the door window. Hospital staff came and went, but Nancy noticed they were all deferential, careful. Word had clearly spread about who these children belonged to. Around 7 a.m., a nurse brought breakfast, not the usual hospital fare, but actual food from somewhere fancy. Fruit, pastries, coffee that didn't taste like battery acid. Compliments of the Park family, she said, not quite meeting Nancy's eyes. Nancy was picking at a croissant when her phone buzzed. Her mother. Baby girl, where are you? You didn't come home last night. I'm fine, Mama. Just something came up at work. I'm helping out with a situation. What kind of situation? Nancy Gabriel Wright, you better not be in trouble. I'm not in trouble. I helped some kids who were in a bad spot, and now I'm making sure they're okay. That's all. You and your soft heart, her mother sighed, always picking up strays. You remember what I told you about. Taking care of others, but not forgetting to take care of myself. I know, Mama. I'm fine, I promise. They talked for a few more minutes, Nancy carefully editing out details about Korean Mafia bosses and hypothermia, and the fact that she was sitting in a hospital room guarded by men who probably had guns under their suit jackets. When she hung up, Kim was awake, watching her with those big dark eyes. Your mama? He asked in careful English. Yeah, baby, my mama. She was checking on me. She loves you, Kim said matter-of-factly, like my papa loves us. That's right, Nancy said softly. Mamas and papas love their babies. Our mama's in heaven, Kim said. No sadness in his voice, just stating a fact. But Papa says she watches us from there, and she would like you, Miss Nancy, because you're kind. I wish I could have met her, Nancy said, her heart aching for these little boys who'd lost so much. Me too, Kim said. Then with the easy transition of a 5-year-old, can we watch cartoons? Nancy turned on the TV, finding a kids' channel. Kim snuggled into his pillows, content, while Lee dozed in the chair beside the bed, still wrapped in Nancy's coat. And Nancy sat there, in this surreal bubble, wondering how her life had gotten so strange in the span of a few hours. At 8:47 a.m., Uncle Jay entered the room, his expression different, anticipatory. Miss Wright, Haijun is awake. He is asking to see you. Nancy's heart kicked into overdrive. Now? Now. The boys can stay here. My men will watch them. At Kim's distressed sound, Uncle Jay added in Korean, then in English for Nancy's benefit, She will come back. She is just going to talk to your papa. I'll be right back, Nancy promised, standing. She felt woefully unprepared for this. 16 hours into a double shift, wearing her work clothes, no makeup, probably smelling like diner grease and hospital antiseptic. But Uncle Jay was already waiting by the door. They walked through corridors, took an elevator up 3 floors. The men Uncle Jay passed nodded respectfully, and Nancy realized there were more of them. A lot more. Park Hae-jun didn't just have a protection detail. He had an army. They stopped outside a private room at the end of a hallway. 2 men stood guard outside, both visibly armed. Uncle Jay spoke to them in Korean, and they stepped aside. He is still weak, Uncle Jay said quietly, but he insisted on seeing you as soon as he woke. Please, Miss Wright, go easy on him. He feels guilty about his sons being in danger. Nancy nodded, suddenly nervous in a way she hadn't been before. She pushed open the door. The room was dim, curtains drawn against the morning sun. Medical equipment beeped softly, and in the bed, propped up on pillows with bandages visible under his hospital gown, was Park Hae-jun. Nancy's breath caught. Even injured, even in a hospital bed, he was devastating. Late 20s with sharp features that were almost cruel in their beauty. Dark eyes that tracked her movement with predatory awareness despite the obvious pain. Black hair falling across his forehead, must from sleep or surgery or both. And when he saw her, those eyes widened with something Nancy couldn't name. You're Nancy Wright, he said, his voice rough with disuse but the English perfect, barely accented. Mr. Park, Nancy said, staying near the door. I'm glad you're okay. You saved my sons. It wasn't a question. Lee told me everything, the coat, the hospital, how you didn't leave them even when you knew who we were. They needed help, Nancy said simply. I couldn't just walk away. Park Hae-jun stared at her for a long moment, and Nancy felt exposed under that gaze. Like he was looking past her cheap clothes and tired face to something deeper. Come closer, he said finally. Please, I want to see the face of the woman who gave my sons her coat in freezing weather. Nancy moved forward slowly, stopping at the foot of his bed. This close, she could see the pain brackets around his mouth, the shadows under his eyes, the bandages that wrapped his shoulder and chest. Evidence of the 3 bullets Uncle Jay had mentioned. You're beautiful, Park Hae-jun said, and Nancy blinked in surprise. Lee said you were, but I thought it was a child's perception. But he was right. You're stunning. Heat flooded Nancy's cheeks. Mr. Park, I don't think... Hae-jun, he interrupted. Please, you saved my children's lives. The least you can do is call me by my name. Hae-jun, Nancy said, the syllables foreign on her tongue. Your sons are fine. That's what matters. I just did what anyone would do. No, he said firmly. Not anyone. Most people would have walked past or called the police and let the system handle it. But you gave them your coat, your warmth, your time. You stayed with them even after you knew who I was, what I am. That is not what anyone does. That is exceptional. Let me thank you, Hae-jun said, his intensity almost overwhelming. Please, let me replace your coat. Let me compensate you for your time, your kindness. Let me do something to show my gratitude. I don't want your money, Nancy said before she could stop herself. Then what do you want? The question was genuine, curious. Nancy thought about her studio apartment with the leaky ceiling, about her mother's medication that cost half her paycheck, about the community college degree she'd had to abandon for work, about the dreams she'd shelved because survival took precedence. I want your sons to be safe, she said finally. I want them to grow up healthy and happy and loved. That's what I want. That's why I help them. Something shifted in Hai-jun's expression, softened. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? Someone looking for an angle, a payout, connections. He smiled slightly, wincing at the movement. Most people who help my family want something, but you just want my children safe. Of course I do. They're kids. Sweet kids who've been through trauma and lost their mother and almost froze to death waiting for you. The words were harsher than Nancy intended, and she saw them land like blows. Hai-jun's face went tight with pain that had nothing to do with his injuries. I know, he said quietly. I know what I did to them, telling them to run, to wait, not being able to get to them for hours while I dealt with the aftermath of the ambush. They could have died because of my choices, because of my life. But they didn't, Nancy said, and despite herself, she moved closer. They didn't die. They're fine. A little traumatized maybe, but physically okay, and they love you, Hai-jun. Lee was terrified something had happened to you. Kim kept asking when his papa would come. They weren't angry or scared of you. They just wanted you back. Hai-jun closed his eyes and Nancy saw moisture gather at the corners. I don't deserve them. Maybe not, Nancy said bluntly, but you have them, and now you need to do better, be better. Find a way to keep them safe that doesn't involve telling two little boys to run into the night and wait alone in the cold. You're very bold, Hai-jun said, eyes opening to fix on her. Speaking to me like this. Most people are afraid. Should I be afraid? No. The answer was immediate, certain. Never. You saved my sons. You are under my protection now, whether you want it or not. No one will touch you. No one will threaten you. You have my word. I don't need protection, Nancy started, but Hai-jun was shaking his head. Yes, you do. My enemies saw what happened last night. They know my sons were vulnerable, and they'll want to know who helped them, who I'm grateful to. That makes you a target, Nancy. I'm sorry, but that's the reality. Ice flooded Nancy's veins. Are you saying I'm in danger? Because I helped two kids? I'm saying I won't let anything happen to you, Hai-jun said firmly. You'll have protection, security, anything you need to stay safe. I can't afford... It's not a negotiation. It's done. My men are already positioned. At Nancy's alarmed expression, he added, discreetly, you won't even notice them, but they'll be there. Please, Nancy, let me do this. Let me protect the woman who protected my children. Nancy wanted to argue, wanted to say no, but she'd grown up in LA. She knew how these things worked. If Park Hai-jun said she was a target, she probably was. And as much as she hated the idea of needing protection, she hated the idea of ending up dead even more. Okay, she said finally, but nothing invasive. I have a life, a job. I can't have bodyguards following me around the diner. They'll be subtle, Hai-jun promised, then changing the subject. Tell me about yourself. Who is Nancy Wright when she's not saving children? Nobody special, Nancy said. I work at a diner. I take care of my mom. I exist. I don't believe that. Nobody who does what you did is nobody special. He shifted in the bed, wincing. Family. Just me and my mom. My dad left when I was 8. It's been us against the world since then. Your mother raised you well. She did her best, worked 3 jobs to keep us fed and housed, taught me to look out for people who need help, to never walk past someone in trouble. Nancy smiled slightly. That's why I couldn't leave Lee and Kim. My mama would have killed me if I had. I would like to meet her, Hai-jun said, to thank her for raising a daughter who saved my sons. Mr. Park, Hai-jun, you don't need to. I want to, he interrupted. Nancy, you need to understand something. In my world, loyalty is everything. Family is everything. You protected my family when I couldn't. That creates a bond, a debt that can't be paid with money or gifts. It requires relationship, understanding, trust. I don't understand. I'm saying that I want you in our lives, not as an obligation, not as someone I owe, but as someone important. Someone the boys clearly trust and care about. Someone I... He paused, something flickering across his face. Someone I want to know better. Nancy's heart kicked into overdrive. You don't even know me. I know you gave freezing children your only coat. I know you stayed with them when you could have walked away. I know you're brave enough to lecture me about my parenting while I'm lying in a hospital bed with 3 bullet wounds. That's enough to know I want more. This is crazy, Nancy whispered. My life is crazy, Heijun said. But it's my life, and I'm inviting you into it. If you want. No pressure, no obligations, just possibility. Before Nancy could respond, the door burst open. Lee and Kim rushed in, Uncle Jay right behind them looking apologetic. I told them to wait, but they insisted. Papa! Kim launched himself at the bed, and Haijun caught him despite the obvious pain it caused. Lee was more careful, climbing up to sit beside his father. My boys, Haijun murmured in Korean, pulling them close. Nancy saw tears on his face now, unashamed. My brave, strong boys. I'm so sorry. So sorry I left you alone. Miss Nancy found us, Kim said in English, clearly wanting her to understand. She gave us her coat and food and made us warm. Papa, she's a hero like in my movies. She is, Heijun agreed, his eyes finding Nancy over his sons' heads. A true hero. Nancy felt tears prick her own eyes at the scene. This dangerous man holding his children like they were the most precious things in the world. These little boys who'd been through so much still full of love and trust. I should go, Nancy said quietly. Let you have time with your sons. No, both boys protested simultaneously. Kim reached out and Nancy found herself pulled into the strange family tableau, sitting on the edge of the hospital bed with Lee's hand in hers. Stay, Heijun said softly. Please, just a little longer. The boys want you here. And he paused, vulnerability crossing his features. So do I. So Nancy stayed. She sat on that hospital bed and listened to Lee and Kim tell their father about the bus stop and the cold and the nice lady who'd helped them. She watched Haijun's face cycle through emotions. Guilt, relief, gratitude, and something else she couldn't name when he looked at her. And somewhere in that sterile hospital room, with 2 little boys and their criminal father and guards outside the door, Nancy felt something shift in her world, felt the careful walls she'd built around her heart start to crack. This was dangerous. These people were dangerous. But when Kim fell asleep against her side and Lee held her hand while talking to his father, when Haijun smiled at her over his sons' heads with something warm and wondering in his eyes, Nancy couldn't bring herself to care about danger. For the first time in longer than she could remember, she felt like she belonged somewhere, with someone. And that feeling, terrifying as it was, felt like coming home. 2 weeks passed. Nancy went back to her life, or tried to, but everything had changed. True to his word, Haijun had assigned discreet security. She never saw them, but she felt their presence. The drunk who used to harass her on her walk home suddenly disappeared. The group of men who'd catcalled her every night at the bus stop stopped showing up. Her neighborhood, rough on the best days, felt somehow safer. The coat appeared 3 days after the hospital. Not 1 coat, 10, delivered to her apartment by a polite young Korean man who bowed and disappeared before she could protest. Wool, cashmere, down-filled parkas, every coat beautiful and expensive and completely inappropriate for LA's mild winters, except for maybe 2 weeks a year. The note was handwritten in elegant script. You gave us your only coat. Please accept these with our gratitude. The boys insist you have options. HJ. Then the flowers started. Every 3 days, a new arrangement at the diner. Nothing ostentatious, nothing that screamed mob money, just beautiful, thoughtful bouquets with notes in that same elegant handwriting. The boys ask about you daily. They miss their hero. Kim drew you a picture. Lee insists I'm not doing enough to thank you. They're right. I'm healing slowly. The doctors say I can leave the hospital next week. The boys have planned a celebration. They hope you'll attend. Nancy tried to keep her distance, tried to treat this like what it should be, a good deed done, gratitude expressed, everyone moving on with their lives. But her treacherous heart had other ideas. She thought about Haejun constantly, about the way he'd looked at her in that hospital room, about his voice saying, I want to know you better. About the vulnerability in his eyes when he'd held his sons and cried. Her coworkers noticed the changes, the flowers, the way certain rough customers suddenly stopped coming in, the expensive car that sometimes idled across the street during her shifts. Nancy's got a sugar daddy, one of the other waitresses, Jennifer, sing-songed one night. I do not, Nancy shot back, but her cheeks burned. Then what do you call sending flowers and paying for private security? Rico asked, leaning against the counter. Because that's what's happening, isn't it? Park Hae-jun is courting you. He's grateful I helped his kids, that's all. Honey, Rico said gently, I've lived in this neighborhood my whole life. I know how these men operate. Gratitude is a fruit basket and a thank you card. What he's doing? That's interest. Real interest. And you need to decide how you feel about that. Nancy didn't know how she felt. Terrified. Intrigued. Drawn to Hae-jun in a way that made no logical sense. They'd barely spoken. He was a criminal. A single father. A man whose world was violence and danger. But he was also someone who loved his sons fiercely, who wrote thoughtful notes and remembered details, who'd looked at her like she was precious. And God help her, Nancy wanted more of that feeling. The decision was made for her on a rainy Tuesday night. Nancy was closing up the diner when the door chimed. She looked up, ready to say they were closed, and the words died in her throat. Park Hae-jun stood in the doorway, rain dripping from an expensive black coat. He looked better than he had in the hospital, color back in his face, moving without the careful stiffness of injury. But his eyes held the same intensity, the same heat that had made her heart race 2 weeks ago. Nancy, he said, and just her name in his voice made her shiver. I hope I'm not intruding. We're closed, she managed, hating how breathless she sounded. I know. I waited until you were done with your shift. He moved further into the diner, water pooling on the floor from his coat. I wanted to see you, to talk, if you're willing. About what? About why I can't stop thinking about you, Hae-jun said bluntly. About why my sons ask about Miss Nancy every single day. About why I sent 10 coats when one would have sufficed. About why I'm standing in a diner at midnight in the rain when I should be home recovering. Nancy's heart hammered against her ribs. Hae-jun, I'm not good at this, he said, moving closer. Feelings, vulnerability. I've spent years building walls, protecting myself, focusing only on my sons and my business. But then you walked into my life, and suddenly those walls feel like prisons. You don't know me, Nancy whispered, repeating the same argument she'd made in the hospital. Then let me know you, Hae-jun said, stopping in front of her, close enough that she could see water droplets clinging to his eyelashes. Let me take you to dinner. Let me introduce you to my sons properly, not in a hospital room. Let me show you that I'm more than what the world says I am. And what are you, Nancy challenged? Beyond the Mafia boss? Beyond the dangerous man with an army of guards? Who is Park Hae-jun when he's not playing his role? I don't know, he admitted, and the honesty stole her breath. I've been so many things, son, husband, widower, father, leader, that I've lost track of who I am underneath. But with you, Nancy, I want to find out. I want to discover who I could be with someone who sees past all of it. This is insane, Nancy said, but she didn't step back when he reached for her hand. Probably, Hae-jun agreed, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. But insanity runs in my family. My father fell in love with my mother after she punched him for being rude to a restaurant server. They had 30 years together before he died. Sometimes the crazy choices are the right ones. I'm a waitress, Nancy said. I live in a studio apartment in Inglewood. I work double shifts to pay for my mom's medication. Your world and mine, they don't mix. They can't. Why not? Hae-jun challenged. Because of money, I have enough for both of us. Because of danger, I can protect you. Because of background, Nancy, my grandparents were rice farmers in Korea. My father came here with nothing. I'm not some aristocrat looking down on the working class. I am the working class. Just with better resources now. It's not that simple. It is exactly that simple. Hae-jun pulled her closer, his free hand coming up to cup her cheek. I'm attracted to you. You're attracted to me. Don't deny it. I can see it in your eyes. We both have complicated lives and responsibilities, but we also both deserve happiness, a chance at something real. Your sons already love you, already ask when they can see Miss Nancy again, already drew you pictures and planned celebrations. His smile was soft, genuine. Nancy, They lost their mother 3 years ago. Since then, they've had no women in their lives except housekeepers and teachers. But you gave them your coat. You stayed with them when they were scared. They trust you in a way they haven't trusted anyone since their mother died. Tears burned Nancy's eyes. That's not fair. Using your kids. I'm not using them. I'm telling you the truth. My sons need someone like you in their lives. Someone kind and brave and real. And his voice dropped lower, intimate. I need you too. More than I've needed anyone in years. So please, Nancy Wright, give me a chance. One date, one conversation, one opportunity to prove that this crazy thing between us could be something beautiful. Nancy looked into his eyes and saw everything she'd been afraid to want. Connection, passion, the possibility of mattering to someone, of being chosen not despite who she was, but because of it. One date, she heard herself say. But hi, June, if this goes wrong, if your world ends up hurting me or my mom, I will never forgive you. Fair enough, he said, and his smile was like sunrise. I'll pick you up Saturday at 7. Wear something comfortable. I'm taking you somewhere special. He leaned down and Nancy's breath caught, thinking he was going to kiss her. Instead, he pressed his lips to her forehead, a gesture so tender it made her chest ache. Thank you, he murmured against her skin, for saving my sons, for giving me a chance, for being brave enough to let me in. Then he was gone, disappearing into the rain, leaving Nancy alone in the empty diner with her racing heart and trembling hands and the certainty that her life would never be the same. Saturday came too fast and not fast enough. Nancy changed clothes 4 times, settling finally on jeans and a soft purple sweater that brought out the warm tones in her dark skin. Comfortable, like he'd said, but still nice, still showing she cared. He arrived exactly at 7, driving a sleek black sedan that was expensive but not ostentatious. When Nancy opened her apartment door, her breath caught. He wore dark jeans and a charcoal sweater, casual but devastating. His eyes swept over her, and heat flared in their depths. You're beautiful, he said simply. Are you ready? Where are we going? You'll see. He offered his hand and Nancy took it, letting him lead her down to the car. He opened her door, waited until she was settled, then went around to the driver's side. They drove through LA in comfortable silence, Nancy watching the city lights blur past. Finally, curiosity won. You're not going to tell me where we're going? We're almost there. Hi, June smiled slightly. Patience, Nancy. 10 minutes later, they pulled up to a modest house in Koreatown. Warm light spilled from the windows, and Nancy could see small figures moving inside. Is this my home? June confirmed. I wanted you to see where I live, where my sons live. The real me, not the myth. He turned to face her, suddenly vulnerable. And I wanted them to see you again. They've been asking for weeks. If you're not comfortable, I want to meet them, Nancy said, surprised by how much she meant it. Properly this time. The front door flew open before they were halfway up the walk. Lee and Kim came tumbling out, both boys shouting, Miss Nancy, and launching themselves at her. Nancy laughed, going to her knees to catch them both. Hi, babies, she said, hugging them close. I missed you too. We missed you so much, Lee said in careful English. We drew you pictures and made you cookies, and Papa said you were coming, but I didn't believe until I saw you. I'm here, Nancy said, touched by their enthusiasm. Show me these pictures? They dragged her inside, chattering in a mix of Korean and English. The house was warm and lived in, toys scattered across the floor, children's artwork on the walls. Nothing like Nancy had expected from a mob boss's home. This was a family space, filled with love and life. Dinner was Korean food June had cooked, which surprised her, and chaotic and perfect. The boys showed her their rooms, their favorite toys, the tree fort their father had built in the backyard. June watched it all with soft eyes, occasionally translating when the boys got too excited and reverted fully to Korean. After dinner, after the boys were bathed and in pajamas, they insisted on a bedtime story. Miss Nancy has to read it, Kim declared. In English, so we practice. So Nancy found herself sitting on Kim's bed, Lee pressed against one side and Kim against the other, reading about brave knights and clever princesses. June watched from the doorway, and when she looked up, the expression on his face stole her breath. wonder, gratitude, and something deeper, hotter, that made her heart race. When the boys finally fell asleep, Nancy extracted herself carefully and followed Haijun downstairs. He led her to a living room with comfortable furniture and more evidence of children. Crayon drawings, scattered books, a Lego castle in the corner. Coffee? Wine? He offered. Wine sounds good. He poured 2 glasses of red, handed her one, and sat beside her on the couch. Not touching, but close enough that she felt his warmth. Thank you, he said quietly, for tonight, for being so good with them. They adore you, Nancy. I can see it. They're amazing kids, Nancy said honestly. You've done an incredible job with them, Haejun. Despite everything, they're happy and loving and kind. I try, but there are gaps I can't fill. Things they need that I don't know how to give. He turned to face her. Their mother was their whole world. When she died, it shattered them. Lee stopped talking for 3 months. Kim had nightmares every night for a year. I did my best, but you're one person, Nancy finished, and grief is hard. Yes, Haejun's voice was rough. I've given them everything I can. Stability, love, security. But watching you with them tonight, seeing how they lit up, how comfortable they were. Nancy, you give them something I can't. Joy, ease, the feeling of being cared for by someone who doesn't have to love them, but chooses to. Hi, Joan. I'm not asking you to be their mother, he said quickly. I'm not asking for promises you're not ready to make. I'm just saying, you fit here, with us, in this space, and I want to explore what that means. Nancy set down her wine glass, heart pounding. I'm scared. Of what? Of how fast this is moving, of how much I already care about those boys upstairs, of how you make me feel things I swore I'd never feel again after. She stopped, the old pain surfacing. After what? Haejun asked gently. Nancy took a breath. I was engaged once, 3 years ago, to a man I thought loved me. We planned a whole life together, house, kids, forever. And then 2 weeks before the wedding, I came home to find him in our bed with someone else, a white woman, blonde, skinny, everything I wasn't. Nancy, he said he'd been trying to love me, trying to see past my skin, my body, my cultural differences. But he couldn't. He wanted someone who'd fit better into his world, someone his family would accept, someone normal. The old wound still stung, even after years. So yeah, I'm scared, because you're looking at me like I matter, and last time someone did that, it destroyed me. Haejun set down his own glass and took both her hands. That man was a fool and a coward, and nothing like me. Nancy, I'm not trying to fit you into my world. I'm trying to build a new world that has space for both of us. You, me, my sons, your mother, all of it, together. It's too soon to talk like that. Maybe, but I've learned that life is short and unpredictable. I almost died 2 weeks ago, left my sons orphaned. And all I could think, lying in that hospital bed, was that I'd wasted too much time being careful, being closed off. I don't want to waste more time, Nancy. I want to be honest about what I feel. And what do you feel? Nancy whispered. Like I've been waiting for you my whole life, without knowing it. Haejun's hands tightened on hers. Like the universe sent you to save my son so I'd have the chance to meet you. Like every terrible thing that's happened led me here, to this moment, with you. That's crazy. Then be crazy with me. He echoed her own words from weeks ago. Give this a chance. Give us a chance. Let me show you that not all men are cowards, that some of us know precious when we find it and fight to keep it. Nancy looked into his eyes and saw her future, terrifying and beautiful and completely uncertain, but also full of possibility, of 2 little boys who needed love, of a man who'd looked past everything the world said mattered and seen her. Okay, she whispered. Okay, yes, let's try. Let's see where this goes. Haejun's smile was like sunlight breaking through clouds. He pulled her close, and this time when he kissed her, it wasn't on the forehead. It was on her lips, soft and searching and full of promise. And Nancy kissed him back, giving herself permission to hope, to believe, to let herself fall for this impossible man with his tragic past and dangerous present, and the 2 little boys sleeping upstairs who'd already stolen her heart. Outside, rain began to fall, but inside Haejun's home, Wrapped in his arms with the memory of Lee and Kim's laughter still echoing, Nancy felt warm for the first time in years. The black waitress who'd given her coat to freezing children had found something she hadn't even known she was looking for. A family. Broken and complicated and absolutely perfect. And for the first time since her ex-fiancé had shattered her faith in love, Nancy let herself believe in happily ever after. Not the fairy tale kind, but the real kind, built on sacrifice and trust, and choosing each other every single day. The kind worth every risk.